We're good. Okay. Again, good morning, everybody. We're going to have a call to order here. Thank you all for being present either here or online. And we look forward to giving you some updates and some information that are vital to our church. All right. Pastor, are you ready for opening prayer, sir?
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for the gathering of these people and for the work of our church. We pray for your presence in both our words, our actions, and our plans. That the things we do here reflect your good grace and gospel. Through your Son, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
All right. Thank you, Pastor.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's move along. Let's go establishing a quorum. As we look here, we have the necessary number to establish a quorum, and we have, if everyone has please signed in, make sure that you do sign in. Mr. Bleesey in the back has the sign-in sheet if you haven't done that already. He's been all over that, so I appreciate him helping out with it. All right, let's go with a motion for approval of last year's meeting. Do I have a motion? Sandy, thank you. Do I have a second? Mark, thank you. Any discussion? Yes, sir. Okay, they were sent out via email, and then also all of this can be seen. We are live streaming it also on our webpage. We have that as well. So everything that we're going over now is on the webpage.
They were posted on the website on Thursday, as per the email that went out Wednesday. If you have your phones or something, you can go to the treechurch.net website and click on the Members tab, and there will be links there to all the documents that were made available for review prior to the meeting.
Thank you. All right. Any other discussion? Yes, sir. Yes, and once again, please make sure that you have signed in. Russell has a sign-in sheet in the back there. All right. Any other discussion? All right, let's take a vote. All in favor? Show of hands. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. Appointment and approval. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. So moving on, I'm sorry. Okay, new and renewal council appointments. I'm just going to have the council members stand up when I call their names, okay, so that you get a picture of who they are, and then we will move on from there. So if we could get Sandy McCarthy to please stand. Jim Lameau. It's been a rough year, guys. Deb Zimmer. Russ Larson. Okay. Ronnie Whitman. Jenny Jenkins. Mark Template. All right. So these are your council members. If you give them a round of applause for all the work they've been, I'd really appreciate that. All right, now you're going to hear knees cracking and everything else because they're going to be sitting down again here. So thank you all. All right, we would also like to thank our retiring member that's leaving the council this year, Mark Template. All right, he's done an outstanding job for us. He has really came through in helping what's going on around the church. He gets his monthly report to us about different things that are needed around the church, and he does an outstanding job, and from digging trenches to fixing pipes to doing everything, cutting down trees and everything else. So we really appreciate all the work that he's done, and he's going to be missed, and we really appreciate you. Thank you very much. And he's pretty good at a joke every once in a while too, so we'll miss that. All right. Let's move on to congregation nominees. Do we have any people in the congregation that would like to nominate someone to be on the council? Okay. All right. With that in mind, all right, we're going to move on. We're going to go with we got together as a council to get a member to join to take the place, to fill in that spot of Mark and Jeff Mabry. Please stand. He fits in so well. All right, he was gracious enough to accept the calling to join the council, and it didn't take too long. He was very gracious in that, and he's looking forward. He joined us in the January meeting, and he's already jumping in both feet. It was awesome. So it's good to get some fresh blood in there, and he's going to be a great addition to our group. So let's have a motion. First of all, sir, I want to make it public. Do you accept the nomination for the council? No takebacks. Yes, okay. All right, do we have a motion? I see Jenny Jenkins. Do I have a second? I see, point of order.
Be necessarily voting for him, but we would probably just take a vote of acclamation at this point instead of it just being an individual vote for and against.
All right, so we just don't need the motion in the second. We can
right,
just...
I would recommend that we use take a vote of acclamation, meaning that this is the candidate that we have. Since we're not running against anyone, there's not a vote necessarily to be taken.
Perfect. All right, thank you. All right, so a vote of acclamation. All in favor of Jeff joining the group? Show of hands. All opposed, same sign. Strike that from the record. All right, welcome, Jeff. Thank you so much. All right, also, a couple of terms have ended, but they were gracious enough to up their term to do it again. So we have Sandy McCarthy and we have Deb Zimmer. Both their terms have expired, and they have agreed to join us for another term. Yes, sir.
I make a motion of acclamation that we accept their names as presented.
Okay. Second by Ronnie. All right. So, again, vote of acclamation for Sandy to stay as the vice president and Deb to stay as our secretary. A show of hands, please. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. Thank you very much. You've done a great job. I'm very excited to have you stay on the council, because the key, if anyone has been in a type of leadership position, you know that the key of good leadership is surrounding yourself with better people than who you are, and that's exactly what we've done. So I really appreciate that. Okay, let's move on to the president's report, and really wanted to go over a few things. A look back at 2024. Now, we did have some disappointments, really, I guess you could say, with some of the deals that we had with Padea. You know, Padea was the school that we had here that was utilizing our building, and it was started off really well, and then they wanted to increase their time in the building. So as a council, we decided that if they're going to use more days, we need to up our rent to them, which they agreed to. But then it turned out that it probably wasn't the best run organization, and they were going default basically on our contract. All right, we let them finish out the year, and they did make some payments towards us. But once the school year ended, they determined that they couldn't afford to be here. And we, with the help of Jim did a great job talking to them and getting what they could to make good on their contract. They have sent a few checks to us to make up the difference, but it did fall short of what the original agreement was. All right, so we did lose them. We did not want them back, obviously, and so that was disappointing, but yet it saved on our building when they weren't holding up their end, so it just made sense to part ways. All right, we also had got some information a couple months ago that the Y is closing their section of their day camp here for this coming summer. So that is another amount of money that we are losing as well. Okay, so with the loss of Padea's income and with the Y loss of that income, we did fall short on some things. And again, with Jenny did a great job getting people for our pledged offerings and things. Our pledge that we have had in 2024 didn't meet the expectations that we had set. So we did fall short this year, and Jim's going to talk a little bit more about that. So when that happens, as you know, when we fall short, there are cuts that have to be made. All right, and that is also something that we had to do for the 2025 budget, where we did fall short on some things. So in turn, when that happens, we have to make some cuts. And some of those cuts that we had to make, and again, Jim will go into a little more detail with that. We weren't able to give raises this year to our staff, and that hurts, okay? Pastor also was willing to forego some of the expenditures that we had given to him in the past, such as his furthering education and things like that. So we had to, here it is, Amber Alert, yeah. We are in alert, okay. We also, the cleaners, we discovered that we could make a cut in that, and we do have a robot cleaning service that we use, and you'll see them around our building. We have some iRobots that go around and vacuum for us. We do have a person that comes in once a week to do the bathrooms and some other things around, and then Pastor has asked the staff to help out with garbage and things like that. So those are some things that we discovered that we could make some cuts here and there to make this happen. We will reevaluate the budget as we go through this year and see if there are things that we can change or add to or what we need to do. But again, it's up to us. You know, when you go through and your own budget at home, and what you give is give, and we appreciate everything that you can. And if there's sometimes you reevaluate your own budget at home, you think, well, maybe I can give a little bit more. And believe it or not, we'll take it if you decide to do that. All right? So we're not above all of that. All right, so let's look at 2025. We had to make some decisions. All right, and we say, how can we supplement our budget, our money coming in? So this came up, and I think it's a pretty good idea. Now we got to get the ball rolling on this because it's going to be here before you know it. But we looked at what the Y was doing here, okay? So the Y was using our building. They had roughly, Pastor, correct me if I'm wrong, about 40 students that they had here. And so they had a great program going on, okay? And we thought to ourselves, okay, since the Y closed down on us, why don't we cut out the middleman and let's look and see if we can make this happen ourselves. So we do have some talented people in this congregation. We have some people that we're asking to see how we can make this happen. And it is quite, it's going to be quite a thing to pull off. But we have an idea that we could make some really good money with this. Now, there's nothing that we'd have to do to the building as far as making extravagant changes in the educational building or anything like that, because it's already set up with the way we have it as a day camp like the Y did. So we basically just have to find the right people to come in and start this program up and take off from there. All right, so that's what we're looking at doing right now. And it is a long process, but it's a process that we have to jump on right away, get the people in place, see that what kind of recruiting we can get in the number of students, you know, and that's still in the workings, but I think that it's off to a really good start, and that is a way that we could make, you know, anything from $10, $20, $30 plus $1,000 in that time frame, depending on the number of students that we can get. You know, it's all about supply and demand. That demand was there last summer with the Y, with 40 kids, and if we have the supply, we supply the building and the people and the programs to go with that so they have things to do throughout the day. That demand hopefully is still there because they're familiar with this. It's a great location, and there's not a lot of other places that are offering this. So hopefully we can get it out there, people respond, and we can make this work. Okay, so be aware. We'll be keeping you in the loop per se on how this is going, and hopefully we can get it right and make some money for the church. Okay, Pastor, anything to add on that?
I'll add more. I'll add some more during my report.
Okay, all right. So look beyond 2025. This is my last year as president. Okay, so I've been working on the council for about 10 years now or so. So this is the 2025 is the last year of my service in this first round, I guess you would say. So what do we do beyond this? My hope is that this day camp will come through and we can make some really good money and we can really help out the church, because the church is roughly getting over 20 years old now, so things are starting to go. If you were here last week, in the early service, we had people coming here working on the heaters. So you saw a couple guys walking around checking out the thermostat and things like that. So things like that happen, especially when you get 20 plus years old. So to supplement our income, I think this would be a great way of boosting it. And also, when we get people in and they see the type of people that are working here, working with their kids, that could be a great recruitment for people to join the church as well. So that's something that we're looking forward to, and hopefully we can make that happen. All right, does anyone have any questions about any of this? Jill.
Do I have? Okay. I have a question online from Alan Frederick. Has legal ramification been followed up with Paideia regarding the past due amounts?
Okay, so as far as the legal thing, we have looked at that, okay? And the amount of money that they owe us compared to what it could cost us to follow through with that is something that we are weighing, per se, okay? Because believe it or not, you can ask Jenny, attorneys aren't free for the most part, but I had to throw that in there, I'm sorry. But so that is something that we're looking at, and to see if that is something that is worth pursuing or not. So yes. Okay. Any other questions? Say it one more time, I'm sorry.
If people have questions, make sure they come to the mic.
Yes,
Like
thank
you're
you.
doing
Okay,
right now.
so if you do have questions as we move on, there are microphones around the floor here, so you can go up to the microphone. Please state your name, because we have Deb back here that's writing furiously. She's already gone through like 4 or 5 pages, I think. So if you could help her out, and me as well, as saying your name so that we know we have it on record, that would be great. Jim.
Yeah, do we know what happened and to the why that they left?
Pastor has a little more insight on this, but they decided that this place wasn't, well, it wasn't us. Let's put it that way. They loved the facilities here and everything else. They determined that they were more needed in the Woodlands area.
That's a really nice way of putting it there, Kevin.
So
Yeah, because, never mind. Yes.
so there have been, well, the National Theater, they're still here. There's a Children's National Theater that's still here. Jill's done a fantastic job of building a relationship with them. So we didn't lose that group. They're here. They're happy. Everything's good. Now with the Y, I think the upper ranks of not the people that are basically doing the program here, but people above them were the ones that said, hey, they're more needed. This program's more needed in areas of the Woodlands. So we are going to close down here and go down there. So that was, if you want to get Pastor kind of heated, I wouldn't suggest doing it right now. I would wait till after church service and everything. That would be an interesting question to ask him, because I was quite proud of him actually. He got after it a little bit, just put it that way. All right, so yes, so then we were just like, you know what? Let's cut out the middleman. Let's see what we can do with this. The facility is here. We've got people. We're working on getting more people. Let's get the recruitment going and see what we can do with it. Instead of paying them to use our facility, basically, they're getting more money than we are with what they're doing and using our facility, why not look at it and see what we can do? So, any other questions? Shh, okay. All right. Well, with that, my report is concluded, and we are moving on. I probably took longer than what I should have, but
Yeah, I better never hear you complain about my report again, sir. That was 25 minutes on your part. I know, it's so easy to be criticizing, and yet when it's your turn, here we are. That's right. Yeah, no preaching for you today, sir. I began this year at the beach and spent my time planning out my sermons. It was a wonderful way to start the year. We had all kinds of wonderful things that happened, and as I kind of look back over the year, apparently I left my beer in that picture, so please take that for what it's worth. It was in the afternoon, I promise. That it has been a very full year. And I'm just going to very briefly walk you through some of the kind of the wonderful moments and significant times. The first thing we had last year was the wedding of Michaela Andrews, who is now a mom. It's absolutely incredible to me. And one of the things I've discovered is I have been here for a few weeks, and that all of my children are now adults and are becoming active and participating members in this thing we call life. It did not help when I walked in the next week and saw a sign in my chair that said, for the elderly. Not soon after that, we had to say goodbye to Larry Scrivener, longtime member of Tree of Life. And one of the interesting honors of my career has been to take his ashes to Missouri. If you've never checked ashes through airport security, you haven't lived. It was an extraordinary moment and one that will stick with me for some time. And Judy has since moved to Dallas, but certainly has our heart and our love. We sent 2 groups to Kenya last year. Ronnie Whitman and some other folks, including Pastor Cassandra Nagel, who will be accompanying me this week back to Kenya. And then I followed a few months later with a team of folks with Rich and Wayne, myself, and Bruce Rockstro. This time it will be myself, Rich, and as of yesterday I got word that Wayne Rambaran cannot go. Apparently the kidney stones have found him again, and we don't play with those with him because he ended in the ICU last time, and Dr. Rambaran, his wife, has strong feelings about him being in a country that isn't where she practices medicine, if you know what I mean. So we certainly keep Wayne in our prayers and hope that his world gets better. We have been blessed with a very strong staff, and I am always so thankful for the work that they have done, especially when I am gone, putting wells in places that are far from here. We got hit by multiple disasters this year as a community, and Tree of Life stepped up each and every single time. We had 2 major rain events where we helped people muck and gut their homes, and in one case, a Buddhist temple, which is quite a unique and wonderful experience. I was so thankful for the number of people who just said, you know what, they're still our neighbors, they're our friends. Our faith isn't what divides us, it's what unites us. And so we participated in helping make their world a little better. And in the midst of all that, we also had Hurricane Beryl come through, which put this lovely tree on top of Diana Stiglman's vehicle. It's not normally where I keep my trees, but I am not judgmental. Our vice president even at one point decided to see what a tree across her fence and in through her home would look like. Again, Sandy, I would not recommend growing trees in your house, but I am not going to tell you how to live your life. Needless to say, we had many people within our congregation who stepped up, showed up, helped deal with these things as best as we could with everything that we had. And it was a wonderful unifying experience, but also incredibly exhausting. These things come at a price. I will say that one of the notable moments in Hurricane Beryl that I am proud about is that a few hours before Hurricane Beryl came to town, and recognizing that it would be difficult to get resources out, we distributed all 12 generators that we have to everybody. So they were in place, ready to rock and roll when the time came. In other words, nothing didn't get utilized. Everything was used and was available to the community, both in this congregation and going, in some cases we gave even one out to a pastor out in Harris County. So what we have, we've always tried to utilize for the betterment, not just of this congregation, but for the bigger picture. So I take some pride in that. And just personally, it was a year of lots of change for me as a father. I now have a college graduate in my life. My boy has passed his EMS exam, and hopefully starting here in the near future will be running on the truck. God have mercy on us all. And my youngest daughter continues to tell us all what to do. We also had a wonderful milestone moment of having a woman who came and sat in that back pew over there where you are, Steve, and asked me a question. She said, "Is it okay to read Harry Potter and to be a Christian?" And I said, "Well, if not, the pastor here is in a lot of trouble." And she took great relief in that. And 15 years later, right there, we ordained her. And now she serves the good people of Iowa. And I'm sure they're wondering, boy, I never knew a pastor with a southern accent could sound so good. And outstanding it is. Could not be more proud, could not be more pleased. In that same respect, we had many of our own kids stepping out and doing ministry, including Chantel Brown, serving over there at Luther Hill. Odd enough, I remember her being a camper there. Now she has her own campers. And, she's one of those who you can absolutely bet the farm on. And Jeffrey now serves on the full-time staff as an intern there at Luther Hill. And again, these are students that we raised here at Tree of Life, who we took to camp every single year, whether they wanted to or not. Who Jeremy and I beat the living tar out of with love out on the blob, because that's how you show your love. Quite frankly, Jeremy's a lot stronger than I am, so it was more me watching what he did. But still, it was good. It was good. And these students now are serving the church in these capacities. These are things Tree of Life needs to remember during difficult days. That the work that we're doing here matters, and it affects and it makes long-term change, not just in this community, but the bigger picture. And that is worth a little heartache and work, even if it's not pleasant. Which brings me into, where do we go from here? As difficult as this year has been, and wonderful as it has been, 2025 doesn't promise to be a cakewalk. That's all right, we've been here before. One of the very difficult realities that we have to deal with is that the offerings that we produce as a congregation are not enough to pay our bills here. That's not a terrible thing, and it's not an easy thing. As much as I wish I could just go to a few of you and say, hey, by the way, do you have an extra 30 or 60 or 90,000 in your pocket? You don't, do you? Okay, we'll talk. You should never shake that much during a meeting like this. You will be called out. No, I'm just kidding. The fact is that we have raising prices but stable offerings. Jenny Jenkins did a fine job with her stewardship campaign, but the reality is, without supplemental income, we can't keep doing what we're doing here. And as Kevin pointed out, we have an idea. This is a difficult opportunity before us, and it is actually one that may very well work to our benefit. The rec center that belonged to the YMCA for years and years and years was sold to the city for something like $2.1 million. Where that $2.1 million went, I don't know, but I do know that there are now 2 YMCAs in the Woodlands. Now, you can figure it out from there, all right? The work that they were doing there was important because it served a community of underserved people. But I took some hope when the city purchased that building and began to do their own program there through the Oscar Johnson work, and that looked like that had real legs and was going to be wonderful. In January, they have backed out of the west side as well, and that building is now closed. Which means that on the west side, there isn't a place specifically, as of yet, that will take up that mantle. Enter Tree of Life. Here's our opportunity. Now, this is going to be difficult. However, we do have a few things in our favor. We have a congregation that is nimble and willing. That helps a lot. We also have Amanda Welch, who has done this very same program, and this is what she does professionally. And so she and I actually sat down for about 2.5 hours in December. And the initial conversation is, how do we start a daycare here at Tree of Life without having to come up with $150,000 to make all the improvements that we need to do to make that building capable of doing that? And at the end of that conversation, we had nothing. And then she goes, you know, you could do day camp. And we sat back down, drank a whole lot more coffee, and during that plan, we realized that we do not have to change the building, and that the potential of being able to capitalize on the fact that that building over there is closed, and this building is still here and still functioning, and we could pull this off. You might hear us repeating the same thing over and over and over again. The reason is that is as far as we have gotten so far. We do have some work there to do, and we know that time is short if we're going to do this. I will be doing lots of phone calls when I'm in Kenya next week, and that's just fine. We will continue to work the problem. It's possible that we could produce anywhere from $10,000 to $70,000 doing this, while serving the community that we are in, and that has potential. It just isn't going to come easily. On any given day around here, there's the opportunity to do something. Ministry, work, love, compassion, and grace here at Tree of Life. And the next year is going to be difficult. However, I believe that this will come with the same kinds of results this time next year, where we will sit down and say, oh, what a year it has been. Look what we have accomplished. Look what we accidentally did. Look what we are looking at doing. And that said, this is not our first time to be in a difficult year. And I fully expect that our story will have an interesting turns and twists to it. But we have a strong council. We have very gifted people who are committed to our congregation, and that is something I can bank on. Well, that, and we are faithful to our mission here at Tree of Life, which God has called us to do, to invite, inspire, and include all people in Christ's love. In fact, I'll give you a little hint. I think it's time to add some words to that mission statement. And this came about yesterday as I was coming back from Texas Lutheran, where I was at the corporation board meeting with Bishop Mike. And I told him that our numbers in terms of attendance this year were flat. Last year we had 123 in worship. This year we had 124. I said, so we're not going down, we're just not screaming up. And he said to me, if you knew what other churches were doing, you'd be thrilled to death, because a majority of our congregations are losing attendance. The fact that you are flat, he says, flat is the new up. I said, outstanding. That said, I still would like for them to go a little further up if it's all the same with y'all. Call me crazy. But while we were at that meeting, I heard someone else's mission statement, and I'll just toss this out as something to think about. What if our mission statement here at Tree of Life became to be a different and special church that invites, inspires, and includes all people in Christ's love? It's just an idea. But what if we were a different and special place? It fits, doesn't it? We'll play with it. Maybe we'll even see if we can't just do it. Thank you. That ends my report. If you have questions, you're welcome to ask, but I want to remind you that every second you ask me a question means a longer sermon and worship service, so it's up to you. But you are absolutely welcome to ask. So noted. Mr. Treasurer, easy does it there, Coach. She is all yours. Yes, sir. Thank you.
I can guarantee, hey, Jim, am I on? Can you guys hear me? Perfect. I can guarantee you that's not them applauding their father over there, so.
Let me give you this just so you have it in front of you.
Let's see. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oh. Now for the financial part of the conversation here, we're going to actually go at a high level through both the financial report and as well, we're going to go through the budget for 2025. Sorry, we're getting a little bit. Excuse me? Are we good now? Can you hear me? Perfect. So start with the revenue for 2024. We had budgeted $291,000 on pledged offerings, or excuse me, we budgeted $294,448 for pledged offerings, and the actual amount we raised was $291,190, which was a shortfall of roughly $3,000. Next slide, please. As far as non-pledged offerings, we had budgeted $158,000. The actual amount came in at $132,000. This is where we saw the majority of our shortfall on the giving side for 2024. It was a shortfall of a little over $25,000. As far as all other revenue, and this captures all of about 20 different categories, we had budgeted $76,000. The actual amount came in at a little over $71,000. That includes $24,000 approximate that we lost from having Paideia between the shortfall that they missed in the first half of the year and them not being with us for the second half of the year. That was the primary factor there. Bear with me for 2 seconds. That's okay. I don't like wearing this thing anyways. Pastor, I don't know how you do it every week. So can everyone hear me now? So the good part here, though, is we did actually make funds up. We had some generous donations to help us with some of the additions we made to our family ministry group and the summer interns. So that's why that shortfall on all other revenue does not look as painful as it might with the shortage that we had coming out of Paideia. Next slide, please. So that brought us to the total income for 2024. $495,101, which was a shortfall of $33,705 from what we originally budgeted. Next slide, please. Going to go through the revenue side of things. Oh, before we get there, we were required to borrow approximately $15,000 from seeds through the year. That was partially $5,000 in the middle year when we had a shortfall, and then another $10,000 at the end of the year to ensure that we had capital funds available, or excuse me, funds available to pay our expenses. Next slide, please. Yes, for those who are new to the congregation and may not be familiar with Seeds, Seeds is the legacy of a capital giving program that we gave approximately 10, 12 years ago. Had 4 different pillars to Seeds at that point. One of those pillars was to support and pay off the mortgage. So when we say Seeds here, these are the remaining funds from that capital program of 15 years ago. Seeds actually has 2 components in it. One of those is a cash account that we maintain here at our local bank. The other one is an endowment fund that we have that's invested with the Mission Investment Fund. And that has, get to that on the balance sheet here, but you'll actually see what the value of that is when we get over to the dedicated fund sheet. If anybody wants to discuss in more detail what seeds is, if we could take that offline, I just don't want to spend a huge amount of time on that, but definitely a great program that we've got that's really acted as an insurance policy from a financial standpoint for us to make sure we have funds available. So total revenue. Oh, so once you include seeds on that, sorry, when you include the loan that we made from seeds, that gave us a total amount of cash available for this year of $510,000, which was still $18,700 short from what we had budgeted. Next slide, please, on to expenses. So we'll start with the salary side. We had actually spent $277,000 in 2024 on our staff expenses with a budget of $282,943. That was a shortfall of $5,670. That difference was primarily made up through we had a reduction in benefits and we had some reductions in what our staff spent on their personal development throughout the year. So that's going to be showing up in the budget for 2025 as well. As far as the mortgage goes, we actually had budgeted $97,452 for the mortgage. We spent that exact amount. Luckily, this is one of our known expenses. I will want to draw out really quickly on that, though. That's $100,000. The majority, at the end of the day, of why we have these cash flow shortfalls is that mortgage is hanging over our head. If we didn't have that, we'd be in a much, much better place overall. As far as these other categories, administration and benevolence, we spent $62,617 on that. We had budgeted $53,000, which gave us a difference overflow of $9,317. Main factors there is we did need another computer or two for our staff. We recognized during the middle of the year to cover part of that. Part of it was a tie that was made out of a legacy gift coming out of 2023. And then the additional one was some of the additional support that our community needed through the natural disasters that we had this year as well. As far as building, grounds, and utilities, we had budgeted $54,560. The actual amount there came in at $48,447. Which is an underage of little over $6,000. Main thing that caused this variance here was a change in the amount that we ended up paying for our utilities at the end of the year. Now, there's two factors that go into that. One is the reduced usage with Paideia not being in our building for the remainder of the year. With them not using the building, obviously, we didn't use as much utilities when they weren't here. Same thing with some of the office supplies as well. The other one is there could have just been a reduction in energy prices this year. Energy prices are a little bit lower than what they were last year, so that shows up there as well. Don't ask me what the difference is, I don't have that detail off the top of my head. As far as insurance and other, we spent $25,779 and we had budgeted $24,098. That's an overage of $1,680. Two main factors there. One, we did have a little bit of additional spend at the beginning of the year coming out of our 2023 Adopt project. These were work that was done at the end of 2023, but we just didn't pay for it till 2024. So those funds actually hit us. It was unplanned on the budget, but not unexpected. The other one for that is we did have a little bit of an increase in our insurance for this year. You'll actually see that more when we go into the budget for next year, that we're truly going to see some of the impacts of that new insurance policy coming through at that point. You guys may be familiar, we talked about that in the middle of the year. Next slide, please. Youth education and fellowship. So we spent $14,441 with a budget of $17,000. So the major factors here is that we did not have, sorry for a second here. So we did not have camp youth trip this year. We did go to, National Youth Gathering. I'm looking at my numbers here. I made the problem of printing out the report for myself. We did not have National Youth Gathering this year. That was the main one that was causing the underspend at this point. We did actually have a little bit of no, never mind. That's not on me. That's actually, ignore that. The majority of that difference is from National Youth Gathering not occurring. Okay, next slide. Evangelism and worship. This came in as expected. We had We had spent 11,708. We had budgeted 11,650, $50 over budget at that point. So I think that one was a pretty darn good forecast. And I apologize for using the word darn at the podium here. I'll try not to do that again. So total expenses for the year 2024, the spend was $537,692. The budget was $541,004, which is an underage of $3,312. Next, we'll move on to the financial report summary. And this is just where we can go through the entire high-level numbers. As we've already discussed, we spent $510,000 this year. We had budgeted, or we had $510,000 of revenue come in with $537,000 of expenses, which gave us a shortfall for the year of $27,591. That difference was made up, a lot of it through, we had $40,000 in cash sitting in our checking account at the end of the year. So we had approximately $18,000 with some additional spending and numbers that got moved around at the end of the year. And I'll show where the other $5,000 came from here shortly. Next slide, please. Dedicated funds. So before I go into the specific numbers for dedicated funds, when we actually met as a council earlier this year, we recognized that there were 4 dedicated funds that were no longer in service. And I really feel strongly that if these dedicated funds are no longer there, it's not a good support for our mission to just have those funds sitting there. I think we need to be proactive with how we understand the utilization of those funds, and when those ministries are no longer appropriate for us, that we move those funds back over to the general fund. That doesn't mean I think we need to be aggressive with how we manage those funds. It's just when the time is right, as a council, we just have that conversation. So we brought it up to council here earlier this year that there were 4 funds that were no longer aligned with what we saw our future mission statement. Does not mean that those might not come back again at some point in the future. Just means that right now that those missions aren't being supported, so let's move those funds back over to the general fund so we can utilize those. One of those was Adopt a Soldier. That's a fund that we closed at the end of the year. Disaster relief, this is also supporting some of the work that goes on in our community. That ended with a balance of $1,778. Emergency building repair, $0 in that one, but that fund is still going to be there. We want to maintain that fund because we could recognize the need for that one potentially in the future. Endowments, that's one of the funds that we closed, as well as the internship endowment, that went down to 0. King's Embrace. This is a special one. King's Embrace is an external ministry that we support. I know we're all familiar with it. However, we run into the challenge with King's Embrace of how do we ensure that the ministry is supported appropriately from a fiduciary responsibility standpoint. Now, we actually have 2 different ministries that we support through King's Embrace. One of those is acting as a middleman for donations that come in to go to King's Embrace. We want to make sure that those funds go directly to King's Embrace as quickly as possible and as transparently as possible. So that account has $4,936 in it at the end of the year. We do maintain a little bit of funds in that to make sure that account doesn't go to 0 because that's in a separate checking account. And Jill actually just cut a $1,400 check for them this week. So we've got about $3,500 that's in there from an ongoing ministry that we can talk about the details offline if you'd like, but we do basically act that as a pass-through account every month. Bogart, go ahead. So King's Embrace is the charity in Kenya that pastor supports this. Oh, no problem. So then in addition to that, we have the ministry work that we do as a church internally here at King's Embrace. So this is the work that Pastor does, Wayne Rambaran does, others in the congregation do to support that ministry. Fundraising, that comes in directly dedicated to that. So this year, we actually moved that from the general account in 2023 into a dedicated fund in 2024. Because my goal as your treasurer is to never have those funds accidentally get used to help support our expenses here in our building. I want to make sure that that's a totally separate bucket from all the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. Now, you'll see that we actually had a shortfall this year of $1,964 in that account. That's because in 2023, we actually exited the year with $3,552 on the positive side in the general fund for that. So when you think about King's Embrace, we actually have a balance in that account right now of $1,587. It's just showing up as a shortfall because of the accounting of when we made the timing. I'm working with Peggy Little to actually get that shown on the positive side. I just have to be careful with how we move those numbers around from an accounting side to make sure that the book values are appropriately reflected. So seminary scholarship, that's another dedicated fund that we closed this year. Stephen's Ministry, that we have $5,384 available for that ministry work. And then next one, these should be Women of Tree of Life. You guys have $913 available in your dedicated fund. Seeds cash account. This is what we use for short-term cash when we need it, when the general account is not available. This is what you see when we borrow. This is where those funds sit from that we borrow it from. So we started the year with $20,680 in that account. We ended it with $6,120 at the end of the year. There was a few donations that came in, but the remainder of the reason that went down was the $15,000 we borrowed from Seeds shows up in the change in that dedicated fund. And then finally, we have the Seeds Endowment. And this is actually an investment that we have that sits with the Mission Investment Fund. We started the year at $55,000 in that fund, and simply from growth of that fund, that went up to $61,864. Now, I do anticipate in 2025 that I may move some of those funds out of there back over to the cash account if we need those funds available to help us meet our month-to-month expenses. So our total amount that we have in our dedicated funds for 2024 is $79,030. So now to move to the balance sheet, we're going to go through this one quickly. We have total cash and investments for the year-end 2024 of $98,000. Switching format here just a little bit. The number on the left is what we have year-end 2024. The number on the right is what it was year-end 2023. If anyone's confused, I was just trying to make this as concise as possible. Included in that $98,000 is $18,000 in our general fund. So this is what we use day to day to pay for our expenses. Next slide. This is going to be our liabilities. We have two major liabilities as a church. The first one is our mortgage, $1,300,956. Really exciting news here for something that's going to happen next month. We're going to go into the six-figure range of what we owe on our mortgage versus the seven-figure range. New Seeds for Growth. This is money that we've borrowed from Seeds. So this is actually sort of like Social Security. It's a loan that we owe to ourselves. So we actually currently owe $174,000 to Seeds. That started at $159,000 at the beginning of the year. Again, we owe ourselves on that. It's a liability on our balance sheet. It's not something that we physically owe to someone outside of the church. Other liabilities of $21,000, these are basically payroll taxes and just month-to-month accounts payable that we have to account for in our accounting system. So total liabilities, $1.2 million, total equity, $2.2, and then our total liabilities and equity does exactly match what our total assets is. So any accountants in the room can feel comfort that those new numbers do balance. Next slide. Do want to recognize that we did an audit this year. This is the first time that we've done an audit in a few years. After COVID, we fell behind a little bit. So I wanted to thank Bernadette, Rick, and Jim Rust for the work that these guys did on doing the audit for us. It's two things here with an audit. The first one that's most important is to ensure that staff and council is behaving in a fiduciary responsible manner with the funds of the congregation. I don't ever actually think about that as the primary responsibility, but it has to be to make sure that nothing is going on with those funds. And I can guarantee you that that is exactly what they found. The other great opportunity that the audit presents to us is identifying ways that we can make sure that we're doing things in a safe of a manner as we possibly are, and being as responsible and transparent as much as we possibly are with the way that we manage the finances of the church. So want to recognize those guys. I know they put a ton of work in this summer doing that. Ball started rolling in May, and we approved it at the October council meeting. Go ahead, next slide. Thank you, guys. I definitely appreciate that. So a few things that we found here when they went through the audit process. One is records, management, and retention. We had paper records going back 20 some odd years that sit in our attic next door at the building. Audit committee came back and said 5 years is what you should have. You don't want anything more than that. And then we also recognize that it's important to move those to an online resource versus having boxes sitting in the attic next door where they're not very accessible. Unless Jill really likes climbing around in the attic, which I don't think she does. So they're actually have found a volunteer who's in the process of digitizing all of those records. We're going to use that going point forward, but we're also going back. Anything within the last 5 years, we're digitizing those, putting those online, and we're destroying all the stuff that goes back years prior to that. So it's a responsible way to manage our records. Closure of legacy dedicated funds. This was something that came out of the audit. We've already discussed the impact of doing that with the 4 that got closed at that point. And then segregation of duties and account signatures. Ultimately, what ended up happening here is we have a few individuals we want to make sure that there's a division of responsibilities between the people who manage the revenue that comes into the church, the people that manage the books inside of the church for us, and then the individuals who have check writing authority. And you never want to be in a situation where any of those individuals have overlap on any of those other responsibilities, because it creates the potential for someone to do something that's extremely inappropriate and illegal. It's not the right way to manage it. We recognize that there was a potential conflict here, so the individuals who had that potential conflict had their names taken off of check writing authority to ensure that we never, and this does not mean that we don't trust them, nothing of that order. It's truly about how do we set up the system well enough to ensure that we never get into a problem with any of this. So Peggy had her check writing authority removed as our bookkeeper, and then Heidi as our financial secretary. She also had her access to writing checks removed as well. So, and actually, great opportunity here too. I did want to recognize Heidi for the work that she does managing our finances. Want to recognize Peggy Little for all the work that she does on bookkeeping. And then the other one I want to recognize from the budget is Jenny, just from all the stewardship. So I want to thank them for all the work that you guys do from there as well. So, and as I already mentioned, we approved that at the October. Yeah, so if we can get a motion to receive the findings of the audit committee for 2023, Jack Zimmer first, and then Shar for the second. All in favor of accepting those findings? All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Kevin. So now we'll actually jump over into the budget. So this is going to include a lot of material that Pastor and Kevin have already discussed, but our budget for 2024 is $306,000 for coming out of the stewardship campaign. We actually see an increase of $12,000 from last year's stewardship campaign, so I want to thank all of you who've made your pledge throughout the year. Really helps us as we're going through the pledge process. As far as, next slide, please. Non-pledged, you saw that we did have a shortfall of $26,000 from between budget last year and actual last year. Part of the reason of what goes on here is that as we get more people signing up for pledged, those people in families move from the non-pledged category over to the pledged category. So part of the number that you see here is a more conservative number based off of the giving last year. Part of that is the success of the stewardship campaign as families move from non-pledged into pledged. So this year we are proposing a budget of $103,615 for the non-pledged offering side. Next slide. So as far as miscellaneous income goes on the budget side, so we are proposing a budget of $60,100 for 2025 for miscellaneous income. One item I do want to mention on here is we do have $20,000 in there for a 2025 Adopt a Project. This is related to the camp work that Kevin and Pastor have talked about. I know Pastor mentioned that the building is in good shape. It doesn't need a lot of support to get it up and running. We do recognize that there are going to be resources required, though, to get this thing off the ground. There's going to be increased staffing and other work that needs to be done to make this happen. So in order to do that, we're going to need we're guessing approximately $20,000. That number will get cleaned up as we go further into the planning process, but want to put that on the budget right now. We do not put any additional funds on there right now for the usage of the building. Actually, next slide, because that's where that actually is covered. Yes, sir. So this is actually where the building use fee shows up on here, is within that $19,500. That's basically $1,500 in interest and $18,000 in building use, which is similar to what we were expecting this year had we had youth camp. Had we not had Paideia, it does not include any of the revenue that Pastor was talking about, so it is conservative from that standpoint. As Kevin mentioned, as we revisit the budget through the year, this number is expected to go up if we are able to successfully pull that summer camp off. So that, we are not expecting to borrow anything from seeds at this point. That's not in the budget. So our total proposed budget on the revenue side for 2025 is $489,637. Just keep it here for 2 seconds, please, Jim. One other number I do want to mention and remind you about is that we had $18,112 sitting in our general checking account at the end of 2024 as well. I know a number of you are interested in that number. So next slide, please. Our expenses side. On the staff side, we're proposing a budget of $280,265 for 2025. The reason for the increase over 2024, there's two numbers that go into that. One of those is that the cleaning staff moved from a building fee over to a staff fee. The person who's cleaning that is now an employee of Tree of Life versus a company that we contract to do that with. So that's one of those numbers. The other one is in January, we get numbers for updated benefits for Jill and Pastor. Most of the times when we meet, we don't have those numbers in time to get that into the budget here. This year, we actually got those numbers a week early, so the up-to-date numbers for benefits for Pastor and Jill are in there as well. And those are the two factors that went into there to that increase. As Kevin mentioned, we did take some significant cuts here. Staff did not get a raise. And then Pastor and Jill, and other staff members, we pulled back on their development and professional charges that we were allocating to them in the budget as well. Mortgage, that's exactly what it has been for a while now, $97,452. We'll mention on the mortgage that we're on a 5-year ARM at a 4.875 interest rate on that mortgage. That 5-year ARM expires in April of 2026. So we're already starting to think about how do we respond to when that mortgage needs to have a new interest rate. If you guys have looked at your own personal interest rates, 4.875 isn't happening at this point. It's something we recognize as a risk in the future. We're going to be working that as we get towards the later half of this year. So next number, administration and benevolence. We actually spent $62,617. We're cutting that down to $33,575 this year. Two major numbers that we're doing here. One is given the amount of computers that we had to purchase last year, we don't see the need for computers this year. The other one is on the benevolence side. As I mentioned in the 2024 review, we had a $2,500 tithe that went to support from a legacy gift that was given in 2023. The other one is our Synod benevolence. We give
We give a donation every month to the Synod to support the work that they do. Last year, we gave a total of $30,000 to the Synod. We recognize, given what our current financial forecast is looking like this year, that it's going to be a challenge to do that underneath our current, so we ended up dropping that to $15,000. I know myself personally, if we are able to get some of this additional revenue coming back, I would like to go back up to the $30,000. It's just from being financially responsible, I think it's a bit challenging to do that right now, given some of the financial headwinds that we're facing. Next number, buildings, utilities, and grounds. We had budgeted $54,000. The actual came in at $48,000 here. Honestly, we feel comfortable with dropping that to $38,000 based off of reduced building usage. We're not going to have Paideia in there for the entire year, and it's really based off of how do we make sure that we try to manage the grounds as appropriately, and then with just reduced building usage. That's where that reduced number comes from. I do recognize I've got 5 minutes before 10:30 service, so we'll get this finished up. So insurance and other. This might be the most boring sermon ever if you just have to listen to a financial report. On the insurance side, as you guys know, our church liability insurance was renewed here in September. We were able to get a new insurance policy, but that rate on that went up to $23,170 for the 2025 year. It's not as bad as what we were originally panicking about over the course of the summer. It's still, though, an increase of about $5,000 or $6,000 from what we previously had. So, and then the other one on that was part of the increase. The other increase is the $20,000 Adopt a Project that we mentioned. We know that's in there. We didn't want to put that into staff or other expenses at this point, but in order to reflect that, we put the $20,000 expense associated with that Adopt a Project underneath the other category at this point. So that's why you see that number going up approximately $25,000 from what we previously had. It's those two factors. Next category, youth education and fellowship. Our budget for the spend we had in 2024 was $14,000. Our 2025 proposed budget is $5,530. Now, my concern here, and I mention this every year, but I think it bears repeating again. When we build the budget, we don't put funds in the budget to send our kids to camp. However, as a council and as your treasurer, I am committed to making sure that every kid that wants to go to camp goes to camp. So if you're financially unable to support your kids going to camp, we will find the funds. We have members in our congregation who are willing to support you and support your kids going to camp. So please talk with Diana, talk to Ikira, talk to Pastor. If that's a concern for you, we will find those funds. So that's not in any way, shape, or form saying that that's a change in that regard. I want to make sure everybody's clear of that. I know that number is going to go up, but it's going to go up on the revenue side as well as we ask for donations to make sure that our kids all go to camp. No kid should never go to camp because of financial concerns, period. Next slide. Evangelism and worship, $11,650 is what our spend was. That's actually, we're going to be a little bit pulling back on some of the stuff we do this year. So we're getting that down to $8,580. So we can talk about some of the specifics there if you'd like, but that's that number. So total expenses in 2024, we spent $537,692. Our proposed budget, when you start adding all of this up, is $514,287 for the total expenses of what we're planning for this year. Next slide, please. So in summary, our expected revenue is actually we can skip this slide. We've already gone through all these numbers. A proposed budget for this year is proposed revenue for this year is $489,637. Our proposed expenses for this year is $514,287 with a difference shortfall of $24,650. Now, two things I will say there is we had $18,000 in cash in our checking account at the start of the year, and then in addition to that, we had $6,000 in the Seeds cash account as well. So we have funds available, if all things being equal, with what we have between the endowment and cash to cover that shortfall. but we don't want to do that. So to Pastor's point, anything we can do to increase revenue would definitely help. You've heard some of the cuts that we had to make. They're getting uncomfortable with some of those. So that's why you see us pushing as much as we can to identify additional sources of revenue. With that, I will actually, let me start by making a motion to accept the proposed budget from council to the congregation. Can I get a motion? So Ronnie is a first, Mark Template is the second. Now with that, I'll open the floor to questions about the budget. If you could, as a reminder, come to the microphone, state your name, just for Deb, so we can get that on record, and for the people online. But open the floor to questions. This may set a record. Well, if there are no questions, I will make a motion to, or let's have a vote to accept the budget as presented. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. We accept the budget. I will mention, if anyone would like to have specific questions, I'm available either after service today or at any time to discuss any of the items on this budget. So I thank you again for all of your guys' support on this.
All right, one more time. Thank Jim for all the hard work that he's done. All right, with that being said, we are going to have closing prayer, and then we are going to adjourn. We're running a little behind. So, Pastor, take it away.
And let me just say, we will start worship here in about 5 minutes. Give me a second to, find my sermon and stuff. So, the Lord be with you. Also with you. Let us pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for the day, for the challenges before us, and that you're promised to walk through us through these things. May we find hope in unexpected and wonderful places. And may we continue to be the congregation you call us to be. Through your Son we pray. Amen.
All right, thank you all.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Yes, we do. I need a motion to adjourn. Jack, I just saw you. You flinched. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, there we go. Point of order. We don't have to do that.
Boom.
All right.
That's why I like having
Give us
them
about
around.
5 minutes,
Thank you
y'all.
all.
We'll get ready to go. John,
Meeting
play
adjourned.
some pretty music or something so you can distract the nice people.